Mr. Bilal, first of all, thank you for your time and for this interview for TV1. Is this your first time in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and what does Bosnia stand for you?
Thank you very much for hosting me. Actually, I've been to Sarajevo a couple of times before, so I had a chance to visit with my family. We have seen the sites. Başarşija, Virolo, Bosnia, Mostar, we have been to all those places.
How do you like our country?
Well, it's very beautiful. It's very similar to actually the Western Turkish climate and geography. It's very green. You have very nice springs and rivers, and the weather is very pleasant, and so it's really a very familiar place. The architecture, the history is a common history. When you go to the museum at the center of Sarajevo, you see many things that are very similar. The old clothes, the items that they used in their homes. So
similar
it's very
culture.
familiar, very similar. So to me, Bosnia is just very close, very near, very friendly, like a relative, like a neighbor, really. That's what I feel like when I come here.
What does Bosnian people stand for Turkish people?
Well, in Turkey, Ali Izetbegovic is very famous. I mean, for Turkish people, he really represents someone who can stand up for his nation, but also be very refined about it with his ideas, with his messages, with a very global vision rather than being very local and very inward-looking. He had a very global vision, but he was able to stand up for his people, and he was able to uphold principles in his way of acting. So I think the first thing that comes to my mind is always Ali Izetbegovic. But then obviously that the fact that we share the same culture, the same religion, and that we feel like if something happens here, we are affected. And if something happens in Turkey, we feel that our sisters and brothers in Bosnia feel with us.
You are the son of one of the most powerful politicians in the world. It's a huge responsibility for you. How would you describe your father? Is your father strict to you? How he is now with you?
Actually, he's not at all a strict person at home. He really likes to spend time with his grandchildren. He likes to watch soccer on TV when there is a game. He used to be a player, you know, and he enjoys Turkish classical music a lot. But obviously he's a man of ideals, and he wouldn't change his ideals for anything. That is why as the leader of an important country like Turkey, he could have made agreements with the EU, with the US, with other global players to his benefit. But you see all the decisions that he has made over the last 16, 17 years that were very idealistic and very courageous. We see that he's taking the interests of his country to the fore. That's why he has faced many troubles within and outside of our country. That's why what's going on today in northern Syria, that we are trying to secure our borders and protecting the interests of our country. He is making these decisions with the support of his people, despite the critique coming from elsewhere, from outside of Turkey.
What does it look like to be his son?
Well, it's obviously a challenge because what we have lived in Turkey is always we have been an easy target to hit at, to damage my father politically, because as a family we haven't had means to do our PR, so to speak. So that is why we have faced many incidents regarding, the things that were not true, allegations that had no basis. etc. But usually our stand has been to not regard those and keep on doing what we believe is right. All of my family is trying to do things that would benefit society. My mother has been championing, for instance, girls' education in the past. Now she's championing the environment in Turkey. She's working to create a zero waste way of living in homes and in institutions. I am involved with educational charities and traditional sports. My sisters, they are involved in similar endeavors, women's empowerment, and etc. So if we are sure that what we are doing is beneficial to our society, to our country, we will not have to spend time to respond to allegations that have no basis, that have no evidence or anything like that.
When you look at your father, is there any actions that he did that you are especially proud of them and that you really admire?
There are many things, obviously, and sometimes I think if you list 5 or 10 of those things, really there has been no politician that I know in Turkey that would make even one of those decisions. I mean, one of them is probably what he did in Davos. You can say that to Shimon Peres. He shouted the injustice that the Israelis have been doing to the Palestinians to their face. His speeches in the United Nations General Assembly, each one of them have been really critical, really monumental, especially the last one from a couple of weeks ago was very important. He is the only world leader who talks about the spoiled or crooked, I don't know how to really say it, an imbalanced nature of the world order that's trying to be supported by the big powers, and it's really hurting the poor of the world. It's really hurting the unprivileged members of the society. So the West is trying to keep their consolidation of power in politics, in economics, and this is really unsustainable. It's not going to lead to a more peaceful world and society. And I'm proud of my father for being a leader who clearly comes out and in very certain terms lays out what he sees as unjust and wrong for the future of the world.
In your opinion, where did he get this honor, courage for his country?
Obviously, he's from northeast part of Turkey, and people there are usually very decisive and very adamant in things that they believe in. But of course, in his education in Istanbul, the schools he went to, the teachers that he had, I think they were able to instill in him this idealism about our belief system, our culture, and to work for a revival of our own identity, because the last 2 centuries have taken a toll on our identity, on the Turkish identity, on the Muslim identity. The Muslim world have gone through great troubles, especially during the recent decades. And so these have been challenges that he grew up with to face and to try to deal with. And when he has this ability to stand up and to deal with these issues, that's what he's doing now, very decisively and adamantly.
How would you describe your mother, the First Lady of Turkey, Miss Eminem? How was she in your early childhood?
Obviously, because my father would usually be away for his political travels and speeches and conferences, etc. My mom has been the one who was responsible for our schooling, for our upbringing, etc. But then when I was 8 years of age, she also joined the women's organization of the party at the time. So she was active in the home, or also in politics as well. It was the first women's branch of a political party in Turkey. And she has been also a very idealistic woman. That's how they met, actually, in a conference, because my mother was in a women's organization, my father was in the youth branch of the party. That's how they met. So both were activists in their fields, and my mom is really a very proud woman who is very, I think, very well representing the values of the Turkish woman in our society. And the fact that she is taking up these agenda items like environment, like girls' education, is really inspiring other girls like her, because her family comes from southeast of Turkey, a very poor background, but the fact that she has been able to inspire girls from southeast to study, to go to universities. The role of women in the society, not only as a labor, but also an important backbone of the society by being active in social issues, and also by being the backbone of the household, basically, because in our culture, the woman's role in the household is primary and dominant. So that's why I'm very proud of her too.
You have 2 sisters and 1 brother.
Mm-hmm.
Are you very close to your sisters or brother?
Well, obviously everyone is married now, they have their families now, they have their children. We try to come together whenever we can. It's not so easy nowadays, given the city of Istanbul as a very crowded city. Whenever we can get a chance to see my father and my mother, we try to arrange something and get together. So hopefully we're trying to keep the family ties strong.
On 5th July, 3 years ago, there was a coup d'etat in Turkey against state institutions, governments, and directly Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Do you remember of that day? Did you spoke with your father, and have you been afraid for your family?
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, we weren't expecting such a coup attempt, but it was always something we thought about, because this has been a reality of Turkey's political history. And so when we were questioning what's going on from the first signals that we saw on TV, my immediate reaction was this was a coup attempt, because somewhere I think behind my mind I was always expecting something like that, even though I wasn't imminently thinking about it. And I remember my father, when we talked about these things, he would always say, we will counter it. If there is a coup attempt, we will be the ones getting on top of the tanks if necessary. But this wasn't something he publicly shared, as far as I can recall. Well, the opposition leader said something like this, but he escaped when that happened. That's another story. But that night, of course, some part of the family was on the Anatolian side, some part of the family was on the European side. We gathered on both sides. Then we went to the airport. We were in the European side. And we joined my father when he arrived to Istanbul. Almost as he arrived, we arrived at the airport, because the roads were not safe. It was very crowded. And we were at the airport until about noon after the morning, and until about sunrise we had fighter jets and helicopters circling around the airport. And so it was a tense moment, but well, being a member of such a family, these things, I guess, can become a part of your story, or when it becomes a history. But I guess you have to do what you believe to be the right thing. And when people say there is not going to be a coup again in Turkey, I don't agree with that. I think we have to be aware that there is such a threat. We have to work against it. But when it comes around, if it comes around, we should be ready to do what we did 3 years ago.
You are the third child of Recep Tayyip Erdogan. I know that you are a businessman, but do you envisage...
I'm second.
Really?
Yes.
Do you envisage maybe to go one day into politics?
I don't actually. Recently I told about this to someone else, and I think what I'm trying to do now in civil society is very important, and it is also something that can be long-lasting, because as a country we need to have a strong civil society, and if I can contribute to that, I think that's an important contribution that can last just like a contribution through politics.
What does Alija Izetbegović and his legacy stands for Turkish people?
Well, as I said, when I came here before too, I realized that his legacy is not as visible as it should be in Bosnia-Herzegovina. So I think he is more visible in Turkey than he is in Bosnia-Herzegovina. This is what I felt. I hope the youth of Bosnia-Herzegovina will protect his legacy and live up to his legacy, and take the flag and take it to a better future. Think about what he would have done if he was alive another 10 years, another 20 years, another 30 years. This is the way to protect someone's legacy, a leader like him. And if the youth of Bosnia-Herzegovina live up to his legacy and protect his legacy, maybe revive his legacy if that's what needs to be done, it would be really beneficial for this country. That is what I really think about when I come here.
In your opinion, where do you see we can make better cooperation between our two countries? We often can hear that Turkey gives for Bosnia love and for Serbia investment. How do you comment this point?
Well, that's obviously not true. The problem with Turkey has invested a lot in Bosnia in terms of cultural projects and business investments, but the governing way that was set up through Dayton is really difficult to function, difficult to get things done. That's the trouble, I think. Otherwise, Turkey is doing whatever it can do, given this government situation, given this structure here that was set up. There are too many players, there are too many disagreements. You don't have a government now for 1 year, more than 1 year. These are making it difficult for Turkey to become more helpful, I think. That's the trouble. But the president is just one call ahead. Any time there is a call from here, he responds, he reacts, he tries to help. And our ambassador and his team are actively on the ground trying to help with anything they can. But really, I think the obstacle is the difficulties that Bosnia is facing itself, and that's making it more difficult for Turkey to help, I think.
Mr. Erdogan, today you have opened officially the course of traditional Turkish archery. Why do you like this sport, and do you have experience in shooting?
Well, traditional Turkish archery is something I was involved in 2012 because where I grew up there is a very old tekke of archery, and it was revived 7 years ago, and I'm on the board of that sports foundation. We are popularizing archery in Turkey and traditional archery especially. I see this as an important area for reviving our own culture and identity. We can start from traditional sports. When we do that, we can also add to it our traditional music, our traditional aesthetics approach, our traditional cuisine, etc. So we have a very deep culture, Bosnia has, Turkey has, and we should preserve it, we should protect it, we should carry it to the future so that we can create a future with our own identity. If we lose our identity, which is what's happening recently or for about 1 or 2 centuries, then what we think as our future is somebody else's future. It's Europe's future, it's the West's future, right? To be independent militarily, to be independent economically is not enough for a full independence. You need also cultural independence. Not to say that there is not going to be cultural interaction and sharing, which, I mean, Turkey has a very multifaceted, very colorful culture. Has traces from Byzantium to Persia to Central Asia and Middle East. It's a very rich culture, but to totally forget your own culture means losing your identity. That's why I think traditional sports is an important way to connect today's youth with their rich culture.
Mr. Erdogan, I wish you well. I wish your family well, and thank you for your time and for this interview for TV1.
Thank you very much.
Good luck, and come back soon.
Sure.